Well, for more on this morning's unexpected shakeup at the top of GM, I want to bring in a former member of President Obama's Auto Task Force, Harry Wilson. Harry, good to talk with you.
Hi, Betty. How are you?
Good. Now, Harry, did you know Chris Liddell?
I didn't. I actually do know Dan Ammann quite well, but Chris came in after our work was complete.
What do you think of this, him stepping down?
Well, you know, it's interesting. And I was there were some rumors about this, but I was a bit surprised, frankly. And I think it's a bad news, good news story. The bad news is it's another example of management turnover, which is unfortunate. The good news is the GM has a much deeper bench than it had a year and a half ago. And Dan, who's worked with the company as a banker and then as an executive for I don't know how many years, a long time, knows the company quite well. And I think once investors get to know him, we'll like him quite a bit.
Well, do you get the sense that he's going to be a long-term replacement, or is he just a placeholder?
No, I would expect him to be a long-term replacement. I think he left Morgan Stanley to join GM for a long-term commitment. I suspect he probably didn't expect to be CFO this early, but
right.
But I think he's in it for the long haul.
You know, the report or the word on the street is that, you know, Liddell left because he got passed over for the CEO job. Is that what you got the sense of from Liddell, that he was aiming for the top spot at GM?
Well, I didn't get this from Liddell since I don't know him, but certainly from the speculation was, in fact, when he left Microsoft, the press release at the time said that he was looking for opportunities beyond being a CFO. And so when he became the CFO of GM, that just fed the speculation that he was expecting to become CEO at some point in the future. So I think that's probably reasonable, and given his age and his accomplishments, is probably sensible. In fact, today in the call this morning, he said that he would not become a CFO again, which I think further feeds into that narrative. Into
that idea. Would he have made a good CEO at GM?
I don't know. You know, GM's actually had a mixed history of CFOs becoming CEO. Rick Wagner was the CFO, but I think that he certainly done a good job in his 14 months at the company. It's just a question whether he could transition from being a financial executive to really running what is a massive corporation.
So, Harry, you've had an inside look at GM, literally. I mean, you've looked at their numbers. You know what's going on at that company. Why can't they get their management straight?
Well, it's a great question, Betty, and I think that it's two things. One is this is the biggest cultural change of any organization, I think, in American corporate history. You know, and we felt at the time that we were there that was still the remaining challenge the company had, was overhauling a culture that was one of mediocrity and one of real success. And so I think there's some natural fits and starts in the process of doing that. And unfortunately, it's playing out on the world's biggest stage rather than private, when these things are normally done.
Right.
So Chris was actually the first outside executive who came in who stepped down that I'm aware of, at least at the senior level. Most of the other changes were people who were holdovers from from the previous regime.
But then, Harry, does this raise the question, and particularly for you, whether or not the government stepped out of GM too early?
Another good question, and I think that the administration wrestled with two very big dynamics. On the one hand, they want to maximize value for taxpayers. On the other hand, they were really concerned about being involved in the private sector any longer than was absolutely necessary. And so that's a delicate balance. I always felt that it would have been better to sell shares later, simply to maximize more value for the taxpayers. But it's a delicate balance, and I think that had the government been more involved today, of course, GM would be attacked for being government motors even longer.
Right, but if I'm hearing you right, you think that actually it IPO'd too early then?
Yeah, I felt it was early. I mean, I understand the desire to get the government out, which is a good thing. But I just felt there was a lot more value to be had over time. And I think this hiccup actually is a good opportunity for investors because the fundamentals of the business are still so strong.
Harry, where does this leave GM? What do you think then is next for this company then?
Well, I think they have two, maybe three big challenges. The first is maintaining the high level of profitability they've already established and growing that as the market recovers. Doing that without increasing incentives as they continue to maintain share. The second is really continuing to revamp their product line, which has been going very well, and just continuing that over time to continue to build the brand image of the company. And third is this management issue, is making sure they can really create some real stability at the senior ranks, both for the purposes of internal cohesion as well as from the standpoint of the market.
But, as you were talking, Harry, though, I mean, I was thinking to myself, but, for investors who are in GM, how do they know that Ackerson isn't going to be walking away in 13 months or so?
Well, no, it's a fair question, and that's of course the problem when you have a lot of turnover. I don't expect that to be the case. I think Dan took this opportunity. What he could have taken it earlier, simply Dan Eckerson, that is, simply because he did think this was the right time in his life and the right time in GM's life for this to happen. And he's a very thoughtful, careful guy. So I don't think he would have done it had he not expected to make a multi-year commitment, particularly given the recent history of CEO turnover.
Right. Certainly been some history, Harry. Thank you.